All right, and I'll hand things over to Troy for the roll call of councillors.
That's Madam One. Roll for this evening, Councillor Sean Sampson.
Present.
Councillor Michael Digdon.
Present.
Deputy Warden Melanie Sampson.
Present.
Warden Amanda Mombercat.
Present.
And Councillor Brent Sampson.
Present.
The roll has been called.
Thank you, CIO. So next item on our agenda is the review of the minutes from September 26th. Those were circulated in, sorry, I think I missed one. Items added on the agenda. See, I just checked that off without doing it. So I will ask for any items added. Before we do that, I do want to mention a reorganization in the agenda. The election of warden and deputy warden under number 10 should be moved up to number 6, just in terms of making sure that our meeting flows appropriately. So I would request that change, and I think I have one item to add as well. Strait Area Chamber of Commerce Award nominations. I just wanted to do a mention on that at the end. Are there any other items to add to the agenda?
I do have an item I'd like to add, just a discussion on Langley Lane, please.
Okay. Any other items? Okay, so with those changes to the agenda, could I have a motion to approve, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Could I have a seconder, please?
Second?
Thank you, Deputy Warden. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Now we'll do a review of the minutes from September 26th, 2022. I did note one correction in the minutes. It's under the right to know proclamation. Right now it states, whereas Part XX of the Municipal Government Act, the motion that we made to pass the proclamation didn't include a reference to a specific section, so it should just be corrected to read, whereas the Municipal Government Act gives citizens a right to know, a right of access to information. That was the only correction I think I had noted. Were there any other items? Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion on the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. So, next item on our agenda then is the election of the warden and deputy warden. And so we'll begin with that. And I'll open the floor to nominations for the position of warden.
I'd nominate Amanda Mombercat for warden.
All right, thank you, Councillor Sampson, and I would accept that nomination. There is any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Okay. So nominations, I guess I would look for a motion to cease the nominations for the position of warden.
I'll make the motion to cease nominations.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Digdon. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
Like
Well,
she
thank
was
you,
getting,
everyone.
like you were getting the option to turn it down.
Didn't want to go too fast there. Okay, so we'll follow the same process for the election of deputy warden. I'll open the floor to nominations for the position of deputy warden, please.
I would nominate Councillor Brent Sampson.
Okay. And Councillor Sampson, would you accept that nomination?
I'll accept that.
Okay. Any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Okay, so I'll look for a motion to cease nominations for deputy warden.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Could I have a seconder on that, please?
Second?
Thank you. Councillor Melanie Sampson.
That's going to be a tough one, too.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Thanks, everyone.
Well, congratulations to the two of you.
Well, thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is presentations. We have two lined up for this evening, and the first is from Upland, from Bruce Mans, on the Richmond County Trail Strategy. So over to you, Bruce.
Hello there.
Hi. Yeah. You can tell him to go ahead. Yeah.
You're good to go.
Good to go. Okay, great. So how should I do this? Share my screen and have a presentation on my end, or?
Yes, please.
Yeah? Okay. I think you need to enable me to allow screen share.
Make co-host. Yeah.
There we go.
I'm right good at the Zoom.
Oh, yeah?
Do that.
All right. You can see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. And do you see like all sorts of stuff around it, or just presentation?
Just the presentation.
Oh, perfect. Great.
A little surprised.
When
All right.
things work, yeah.
Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's really great to be here virtually to present the final trail strategy for Richmond County. My name's Bruce Mans. I'm a planner and partner here at Upland, and I'm really excited to give you all a quick overview of the trail strategy. We've got about 15 minutes for this, so I'm going to spend about 10 minutes on the presentation, and then we'll have another 5 or so for any questions if there are any afterwards. Can you see the next slide now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sometimes it doesn't show the next one, but perfect. So just a bit about the project. The key objectives of this project were, one, to assemble a general inventory of Richmond County's existing trails. 2, to identify opportunities to improve existing trails and also to develop new ones. And 3, to provide strategic direction for trail development in Richmond County. And we started this project by collecting and analyzing background data, conducting stakeholder interviews about a year ago. In the summer, we hosted an online mapping tool called Social Pinpoint to gather community feedback on the trails as well. And all this was summarized in a draft strategy document that was shared with the municipality and council for feedback in September. Since then, we've been incorporating the feedback and edits we got on that into the draft, or into the final strategy that we're talking about tonight. So before we dive in, I'll briefly just go over a few reasons why Richmond County should care about trails. The report includes a lot more details about this, but generally trails offer many environmental, economic, social, and health benefits for communities, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Again, the report includes a lot more stats to support these claims. You know, we don't really have a whole lot of time to get into it all tonight, but when kind of considering all these benefits, it's really not surprising that trails are often seen as a symbol of quality of life for many people and for many communities. I'm also quickly just going to go over some of the different types of trails, particularly the ones that we're going to be discussing tonight and ones that are in the trail strategy. So the most common type of walking trail that most people would think about is a typical walking trail, which is usually a 1 to 1.5 meter wide footpath that could be used by usually walkers or pedestrians, and maybe also cross-country skiers or snowshoers in the winter. A multi-use pathway is basically just a wider and more accessible type of trail, and these are usually about 2.5 to 3 meters wide, and they can be used by all sorts of modes of transportation, including walkers, cyclists, cross-country skiers, snowshoers, even horseback riding and equestrian uses. And these types of trails are often provide more of a safe and accessible, barrier-free routes, so that people in a wheelchair or people who use mobility devices can use these types of trails quite easily. Shared use pathway is essentially the same as a multi-use pathway. However, it allows motorized trail users on this as well, including ATVers and snowmobilers. And then an OHV trail is essentially, they're more of a backcountry trail that are exclusively used by off-highway vehicles, like ATVs or snowmobiles. And these typically wouldn't get used by other types of travel modes. However, there are examples where people can cross-country ski or snowshoe on these types of trails as well. Now we have a few less common types of trails as well, but are still quite relevant to Richmond County. Water trails, for example, aren't typically thought of when you're talking about trails, but are really well worth considering in this project, especially in Richmond County due to the abundance of really great paddling routes, and we'll talk a bit about those later. And then finally, mountain bike trails are also a unique trail type that are catered specifically, of course, towards mountain bike users. And these can be simple single track routes that would wind through a hilly area or a forest, or they could be more developed tracks that include specialized structures like berms or banks and even pump tracks. So based on the feedback from stakeholders and the public, along with our background analysis, the trail strategy includes a number of recommendations, and we've grouped them into these 5 categories. And we'll start with trail upgrades and expansions, which focuses on improving and expanding trails that already exist, as opposed to building new ones or extending existing trails as well. And one big project that would fit this category is the St. Peter's Coastal Trail, which has a few different options, many of which I'm sure you've heard about, and each have their own pros and cons. So one option, this slide shows all 3 options. In the top left option is upgrading the trail and continuing it as a multi-use trail, which wouldn't allow motorized use, but would be fully accessible for people in wheelchairs and other mobility aids. Another option is to make it a shared use trail. So that would be the concept in the bottom left of the slide. And this option would allow for motorized users on the trail as well. And it would also allow ATV groups to connect their networks and access services in St. Peter's. But this type of a trail wouldn't be as accessible for people in a wheelchair or people with mobility aids as a multi-use trail or a multi-use pathway would. But then a third option also emerged as a possibility, and this is due to the province currently reviewing their legislation about OHV use on public roads. So while we were working on this project, we learned that the province is currently working towards legislation that would allow OHV groups to use sections of the public right-of-way as long as it meets certain standards like traffic volume, traffic speeds, proper sight lines, etc. So in the past, this hasn't been allowed except for in a handful of pilot project areas scattered across the province. I think there were 5. But if this legislation is amended, which we understood could happen as early as this spring, this could allow for an alternative option here in St. Peter's, where OHV groups could connect their networks and access services in St. Peter's via a new trail that would run north of the village and connect onto Oban Road and Pepperell Street, where they would use that road to get into town. And the same legislation could also be used to allow OHV users to potentially cross the canal and access a lot of the OHV trails in the Largways area. So all these options are in front of the Department of Natural Resources, and they're the ones who will ultimately be handing out a letter of authority to a community group to continue on with this trail and manage it in the future. And they're currently reviewing all these options and plan to hold some community consultations soon to determine the future of this trail and who will manage it. Another existing trail is the Capitolette Eco Trail. This is has a really great potential. However, it needs a lot of upgrades. It's been kind of left without any maintenance over the past decade. But now there's a community group on Alma Down that is in the process of signing a co-management agreement with the province to manage the Petit de Grasse Provincial Park. And their main priority is to revitalize the trail and start promoting it to locals and visitors as a scenic and relatively easy wilderness hiking trail. Richmond County is also home to an extensive OHV trail run by 5 different groups, but very few of them are actually connected with one another. And a common objective that we learned while doing our stakeholder engagement is that all these groups really want to connect their networks so that they can extend their trips and access and share each other's networks. The trail strategy recommends a number of trails to connect these OHV networks together, as well as proposing a new connector that would link into the expansive OHV trail network in Inverness County, which, if realized, would allow OHV users in Richmond County to connect into Inverness and Victoria counties all the way up to the Cape Breton Highlands, which would have huge potential for them to not only market their trails from a tourism point of view, but also to fundraise and host different types of events that could go longer distances. So a lot of potential there as well. The trail strategy also recommends a handful of new trail opportunities. However, most of these are in the really early pre-planning stage. So for an example, there is a community group in the West Bay area that are working with the Brador Lake Biosphere Reserve to develop a network of trails in Richmond County that could eventually connect with a trail that would go completely around the lake. And this would form a new trail that goes around the entire Brador Lakes, and it's a really substantial project. And like I said, it's in the very early days, but if it is realized, it would take some time, but if it is realized, it could be a really great tourism product that could attract hikers from not only around the province, but potentially from around Atlantic Canada or even the world. And they're doing a lot of this type of work in the northern Cape Breton Highlands as well. Another new trail development that is emerging is in the Irish Cove area, where the Johnson Community Development Association is in the early planning phase of developing a network of trails, walking trails in the former Irish Cove quarry site. And lastly, we touched on this earlier, but a really neat idea that we heard from both stakeholders and the public that has a lot of potential was the idea of developing formal water trails in Richmond County and promoting them as a destination tourism product. So Richmond County, as I'm sure you know, has dozens of great water routes in coastal areas and along inland water bodies, but there are 3 in particular, Isle Dam, Horseshoe Coast, Wilderness area, and the Brador Lake itself that have a lot of potential to become like marquee paddling destinations. And these water trails, they could connect provincial parks, islands, beaches, coastal communities, and even connect to some existing walking trails that are off the coast, like the Kaplan Coast Wilderness Trail, and even the future Kapagwet Eco Trail. Third type of recommendation was trail amenities. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but the strategy itself provides a handful of recommendations and guidelines as well on including trail amenities along trails to make them more comfortable, convenient, and attractive. So these would include things like benches, waste bins, dog bags to prevent dog litter, bike repair stations even, and trailhead signs with maps on them. The trail strategy also includes a handful of recommendations to promote trails. So during the public feedback, a recurring comment was that people weren't really aware of all the trails that already exist or couldn't really find much information about them other than through third-party websites. So one way to help with this is by developing, potentially by developing an online trail map that could live on the Richmond County website and could show all the existing trails, including the OHV trails, along with useful information about their length, difficulty, any problem areas, as well as any modes that are permitted on them. So something like this was developed recently in Kings County, and as an example of that on the slide here. And then finally, last but certainly not least, are recommendations on supporting trails. So one recommendation, for example, is developing a formal trails policy that can be incorporated into Richmond County's municipal planning strategy, which is currently being reviewed. And this will provide significant and ongoing support for trails that will remain even if council or staff change over in the future. So this would help protect trails as a priority for the municipality in the long-term future. And then another way that council can support trail development is through a trail funding program. So this could be a budgeted line item that is included in each annual budget, or it could just be part of another recreation-based program. But the idea here is that trail groups could apply to receive a small grant from the municipality for the purposes of developing trails. And then the idea behind this too is that community groups could leverage this small seed grant from the municipality and attract more funding from the province or from federal trail grant programs, which there are many out there right now. And this could really allow them to raise the capital needed to not only build new trails, but also to plan and design for them properly. So that's the highlight reel of the trail strategy again. You know, we only had 10 minutes, but I think I went a little bit over. Again, the actual document includes a lot more information on these recommendations, and it also includes details about how the municipality and its community partners can implement these recommendations, including timelines, potential partners, and potential costs. So I would invite you all to take a look at that document when you have some time, if you haven't already. But for now, I think, yeah, again, we had about 5 minutes for questions or comments, if anyone has any.
Okay, so thanks, Bruce. He probably can't hear me. Do councillors have any questions or comments?
I think the only one I would ask, and I don't, are some of the old roads, were they used, Bruce, to, I guess, turn them into OHV trails? Some of the old, either logging roads or,
I'm not sure if anyone's speaking, but I can't hear anything right now. I hear a bit of a mumbling in the background, but,
Just 1 second.
okay.
So Bruce, the only question I would have was, do you know if any of the old roads that were used by transportation at one point, or the old logging roads, were they considered part of the OHV? And I only looked, I think it's slide number 11. There's actually a road that goes from the Oban Morrison Road, and comes out in, almost on the Dundee side, but I don't really see it on the slide.
Yeah, so it definitely was, and we're aware that our mapping is incomplete, and this is something a lot of the ATV groups are working on, is collecting a lot of that data, the GPS data. There is one fellow named Sheldon Benoit who's working on that and collecting all of that information, and even has information about where they're at with land agreements and whether or not they're like finalized trails or not. So that's something he's working on. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to get that in time for this trail strategy. So it is a gap that we recognized in the actual strategy, but we are aware of, in theory, we're aware of all those different types of routes as well. They're just not on the map, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Digdon, any other questions for Bruce? No? Okay.
Just on that a little bit further too, if anyone does have any specific trails that they are aware of that are, formally approved, if you send those over to me, we can certainly incorporate those into the final strategy. That would be really helpful.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Bruce. If you could extend our thanks to Shelley, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
You're welcome. Is there any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. Well, it's a pleasure working with you all on this, and I hope it's a very helpful resource to help guide trail development in the future. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay, you too. Bye now.
Okay, so really great work on that. Something for us to think about and to maybe do a little more homework on. And I would assume, Troy, that will, because I know the draft was circulated, but then there was work done after that, so we'll receive a copy of that clean draft.
That's fine.
Maybe we could pop that onto the November council meeting, and
Okay.
we could make a formal decision to approve it or
And
not. So,
adopt it, and then we'll post it.
yes, and then we can
Afterwards.
post it on the
Yeah,
website.
absolutely.
Great, okay. All right, so the next item on our agenda is Nova Scotia Works presentation. So I'll welcome Nadine Boudreau, who's here to talk with us about connecting people to jobs and jobs to people. So welcome, Nadine. Thank you very much for coming in this evening with us in person.
Thanks for having me. So, like you just mentioned, I'm here to deliver a presentation, just so that people are aware of the different types of services and the funding that's available through the YMCA of Cape Breton and Nova Scotia Works. So I'm just gonna see if I can, all right. So the YMCA of Cape Breton, Nova Scotia Works has been providing employment services for over 30 years. And we also offer a unified bundle of employment services for job seekers, services to aid businesses, people that want to become self-employed, and connect people to jobs and jobs to people. We have different locations, various locations around Cape Breton. There are quite a few in Sydney, Glace Bay, New Waterford. We are located at 298 Reeve Street in Port Hawkesbury, and we also have outreach services in St. Peters, along with an office in Inverness. Our team, myself, I'm a case manager in Port Hawkesbury. We also have an executive director, an operations manager. We also have job developers that will help employees look for work. Workshop facilitators, any kind of employment support practitioners would meet with employers and try and promote the service, give them help. There's also wage incentives that can be used that will benefit both employer and employees. And we also have career counselors for people that aren't sure what career path that they want to choose. Those are all different types of services that we offer. There are also educational assessments that can be done for adults that are returning to school as well. For our services, we've divided it in two categories. For job seekers, we help them find jobs. We also write resumes, cover letters. We can do mock interviews or prepare them for an interview with an employer. We can provide them career guidance and coaching, help access funding for skills training, someone who needs to be retrained, transitioning career due to a medical reason. We also provide access to computers. We have a computer station, and we also can give you the information and the guidance that you need to start up your own business. And all of our services are free. We also provide free workshops and information sessions. To the employers, we help with the recruitment efforts. We also assist with, as I previously mentioned, with different types of wage subsidies and hiring programs. And typically what we try to do is to match the employers and the job seekers together. We also provide support in hosting different types of job fairs. And again, we offer the workshops and information sessions to our employers as well. The programs that we offer would be skills development, which is if you do want to return to school, you're transitioning a career. The START program is seems to be pretty popular, and that is a wage incentive for the employer, where a percentage of the wages would be paid for the employee, giving the employee the benefit of receiving the work experience that may help them find work in the future, should the START program not work out. We also have self-employment benefits and opportunities fund, which is fantastic for any community members that they can have any types of disabilities, or they self-diagnose with having any types of disabilities. That's also available to employers. Job creation partnership, that's just any kind of enterprise or community partners that are for nonprofit can create different types of projects or positions, and there is funding available for that. As well as graduate to opportunity for new graduates coming out of university. there's funding available to try and make an employee match there, employee-employer. We don't offer the EDGE program in Port Hawkesbury, but they do have that in different regions such as Sydney. We also have youth leadership programs and the Works for You program, which is basically the community members that are trying to re-enter the workforce after being away for a period of time. So it's very beneficial. I could keep going forever, but do you have any questions?
Any questions for Bernadine on that? All right. I know I'm familiar with a lot of those programs, having worked in development for a long time, and they're really great. And
Yeah.
especially the graduate opportunity where you're connecting those recent grads to the workforce
Yeah.
and hopefully keeping them here.
Yes, that's good.
I think with so many employers right now looking to hire, and sometimes they just need a little bit of help to make themselves perhaps look more attractive to those potential
Yep.
employees, or help to fund it if they're not quite sure if that employee is a good fit. It just,
Mhm.
if it reduces that risk, it can make a big difference.
I also want to mention that there's also short-term funding available for people that need essential skills certifications such as first aid, WMIS, OHS. So there is, though, that funding is available, as well as getting them job ready, whether it be tools or equipment. Yeah, so that's available as well.
Yeah, great opportunities to help people.
So Nadine, you mentioned career counseling and
Mhm.
career counselors and youth employment, youth leadership and all that stuff, and information sessions and workshops and stuff.
Yes.
Do you guys attend like schools? Do you put some of
We
these
do
workshops?
have,
Or?
yeah, we do have a school liaison. However, she is with the SRCE, I believe, at this point in time. But there is someone that does visit the schools and will help students create resumes, help them with interview skills, especially if they're just starting off. Students that are going to be going to college will need resumes, will need certain types of skills to get reference letters. Those are all things that can be provided by the school liaison, so it's, yeah. So we also have that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Nadine? Okay, well, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Nadine.
having me.
Absolutely. I think it's an
Okay.
awesome
Great.
opportunity to raise awareness of these programs.
Great.
Really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is new business, and we will begin with Planning Advisory and Heritage Committee. Heritage Property Bylaw number 49 has been referred to the Bylaw and Policy Committee for review through that committee, but we would like to have a motion from council just to cement that referral. So if I could have a motion to refer that bylaw.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Brent Stamps. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Deputy Warden. That's going to take me a few minutes to get used to. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Any further discussion? Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, so that motion is carried. Okay, so the next item is question period, and this would be restricted to the items on the Committee of the Whole report and the Bylaw and Policy Committee report, which we don't have one for this meeting. The number you can call to phone in is 902-226-9885. The Committee of the Whole items include the Accessibility Advisory Committee report, a tax reduction due to fire, cellular advocacy letter, and the Almadam Historical Society Type 1 Infrastructure Grant Fund request. So we'll just give it a minute to see if there are any phone calls regarding the items on the Committee of the Whole report. Or questions from the gallery as well.
Amanda, if I may, not
Sure.
a question on the committee of the whole report, but the question is, how do you get the committee of the whole report to read it before council?
So we publish the items on the
Oh, so it's
agendas
just
now.
the items, I think
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah, we publish the items on the agenda now. Yeah. Although for that matter, we may want to look at publishing the full report with the agenda so that folks would have a little bit more detail.
Like some context to it.
Yeah, I think, would councillors, would you have any opposition to that? I mean, it's a public document anyway, it's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
so maybe for future, we could publish the full report, just as maybe an attachment maybe on the back of the minute, or on the back of the agenda.
Okay.
And then it's all there.
Okay.
That's great. Okay, so I'm not hearing the phone ring, I'm not seeing any questions from the gallery, so we'll move on. And we'll head straight to the committee reports, so over to you, Deputy Brent Sampson. I'm assuming you have the committee of the whole report in front of you, so I'll let you go ahead and take care of that. Thank you.
Committee of the Whole report for the month of October 2022. The committee met on October 11th, 2022. The committee discussed the Accessibility Advisory Committee. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole and staff create and submit an advertisement in the local paper inviting community members with lived experience to consider applying to become a member of the Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor. Could I have a seconder, please?
Second?
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Any further discussion on that item? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
The committee discussed the request for tax reduction due to fire. I move that council accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole that taxes in the amount of $153.15 be written off, which represents taxes on the dwelling only from August 17th, 2022 to March 31st, 2023 for property AAN 03000672 owned by Sheila Latimer, which was completely destroyed by fire.
We have a motion on the floor. Could I have a seconder on that motion, please?
No, second that motion.
Councillor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried.
The committee discussed the cellular advocacy letter. I move that council accept the recommendations of the Committee of the Whole to support the cellular advocacy letter as drafted by Glenn Horn, Chief Administrative Officer of the Municipality of the County of Antigonish.
Okay, the motion's on the floor. Could I have a seconder on that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Digdon. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
The committee discussed the Isle Madame Historical Society Type 1 Infrastructure Grant Request. I move that council accept the recommendations of the Committee of the Whole to defer the Isle Madame Historical Society Type 1 Infrastructure Grant Funds request in the amount of $4,500 to the next regular council meeting, and further move that staff explore funding opportunities within the Canadian Community Building Fund and report back to council.
Okay, the motion is on the floor. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion?
I'll just have a couple of comments about the motion, I feel like we should add a part after that staff explore funding opportunities to include regarding this proposal, and it's the Canada Community Building Fund versus the Canadian, so just a couple of small pieces, content, no change, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to provide some clarity.
just to
then.
provide some clarity
Okay.
and then have the correct term.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried.
This concludes the Committee of the Whole report for the month of October 2022, and I move its adoption.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder on that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Digdon. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried, and thank you very much, Deputy Warden, for your first official act, reading the Committee of the Whole report, and I think you got off easy on this one. There have been some long ones, so they'll be coming at you, I'm sure. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Councillor Melanie Sampson regarding straight area transit. So over to you, Councillor.
Thank you. Over the past few months, I've heard from multiple constituents just about some concerns with some service delivery in the Richmond County area related to the straight area transit. So, of course, there are lots of reasons why service delivery would be impacted in the area. But what I'm requesting of council is that we ask staff to just explore some options to help us in terms of I don't like to use the term solving the problem, but some strategies that maybe we could employ to try to help have a more equitable service, I think, in Richmond County. We do give an awful lot of money to the straight area transit, and I am concerned about the service that we are receiving at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Certainly I would share your concern, and both Councillor Sampson and I are on the board of directors for straight area transit, so I'm sure we hear, you know, we probably get those, that feedback more regularly. But I definitely think it's a good idea to look at alternatives to, you know, some of these solutions, you know, to try to find some solutions, so. And I guess when you're saying staff, we kind of,
Well,
between our staff here as well as the straight area transit.
for sure, yes,
Okay.
of course, yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'll, over to you, Troy, if you would have any comments, or,
Well, yeah, I'll just point me in the right direction. We'll have a conversation with the folks over there. Again, if, as part of your motion and the referral to staff, that if you can forward the issues or concerns that have been raised, so I can go into that conversation with the starting place.
For sure.
And also, the councillors that sit on the committee, if those issues have been raised at your committee level or board level, are there any strategies that are being formulated at your table, so I'm not rehashing conversations you guys have
Yep,
already
for sure.
started? And if I could have that background, then by all means, we'll take the ball and run with it and see what we come up with.
Yeah, great.
okay. Okay, that sounds great. So maybe we could just arrange some time to
Yeah.
meet with Troy and kind of share the information we've collected, and.
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
We'll do that then.
Thank you.
I don't know if we need a motion to that effect. I mean,
I'm willing to second that motion if so.
okay. So would you like to frame it up?
Sure, just make a
Yeah.
motion to ask staff to investigate options for improving service in Richmond County.
From straight area transit.
Keep it
Okay.
Pretty,
Yeah.
yeah.
High level, yeah.
High level.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, because certainly they have their own operations, and we're not looking to impede in that area at all. We're just looking to be helpful.
okay, great. Okay, could I have a seconder on that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. All right, thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. So the next item on the agenda is Director of Public Works regarding a briefing note on the water utility and water line relocation, which was a very interesting briefing note to read indeed. So Troy, I don't know if you wanted to start off, but I'm sure Chris will have comments as well.
Yeah, 100%. This is a project that came to our attention, I believe it was in the summer. It was shortly before I got here, I think, and it was the Director of Public Works brought it to my attention that it's due to work that's being done under that road. We have infrastructure that is there. It's not our infrastructure that needs the work, but because it's ours, we have to pay for it to be moved. So any further details on that, I would defer to Chris, but it just seems like there is no mechanism other than we've explored and had the conversations with the province on this. It is their project, their infrastructure, but because ours is next to it, we're on the hook for paying to move our stuff. So
Okay.
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And of course, not budgeted, so we're looking for council's approval for that unbudgeted expenditure through the water utility.
And the expenditure was 87.
Approximately 87,000 plus
87,000.
HST,
Plus
so it would be
HST.
net of rebate, but,
Right. And that would come from the water utility budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any questions or comments from councillors?
I guess my only comment to that would be, it's based on the briefing note, our due diligence was done. We knew the work was happening. We had those conversations. It wasn't supposed to be impacted, and ultimately it was. So I guess in terms of paying it, I don't know that we have a lot of choices here, but I think that we absolutely want to express our displeasure at not having the proper notice that it would that it potentially could happen, right? I am struggling to understand how a pre-assessment can be done and it had been decided that there would be no effect, and then all of a sudden it did. So, I mean, it's not my area of expertise, but the impression I get as I read through the briefing note, right, is that it's a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, and the amount is not lost on me either. I
No.
mean, that level of investment is almost equivalent to 1 cent, isn't it, of our, of a tax rate raise. It's, it's an extremely high amount of money, and it is unbudgeted, so, I wonder, is it an option for us to go back and suggest a cost share? But I would ask you folks who have been involved in the negotiations thus
Yeah.
far, your opinion on that.
As you saw in the briefing note as well, the price was originally higher, and with the efforts of your Director of Public Works going back to them, they at least were able to get us down to the number that's in front of you now. I'm not sure if there's any appetite for it to go lower. It sounded like that was pretty much a firm number, did it not, Chris?
Yeah, from Nova Scotia Public Works, whether there's other avenues in the province to pursue funds, I'm not certain. We can ask the question, likely through municipal affairs or maybe some other avenue politically.
Is this something that could be almost appealed to the UARB, or would that be like, if we decide that
I'm not sure that would hit you.
we don't agree with,
I don't know.
Is that something that would fall under a gas tax, or could fall under?
Yeah, work on water infrastructure could qualify for CCBF funds.
Okay, so my inclination is, that we do need to pay this bill, I just, we'll have a contractor out there expecting payment, and it certainly is not their fault that this situation has occurred. So, but I also do believe there's, to your point, Deputy Warden, there's some kind of other, either utility-related or political route that we may want to go to make sure that we're not caught like this again.
Madam,
yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
were we given the opportunity to, I don't want to say contract it out ourselves, but do the repair or provide our own contractor to make the upgrade? Or were we?
We had the option initially and we started looking into it, but between getting a tender package together and then going out to tender, we felt it would delay their work. So we gave them the green light to go ahead with the work without approving the amount. I don't know that we could have gotten it done any cheaper. It seems that all prices are inflated lately. So we chose that route. The amount is still quite high, higher than our engineer felt it should have been, but that seems consistent with just about everything we're getting pricing on lately, unfortunately.
Okay, so ultimately, we are looking for a motion, I guess, to authorize staff to pay that bill as recommended.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Digdon. Could I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Any further discussion?
I'm just wondering about we talked about the, Canada Community Building Fund and that it was a potential project that could be covered there, as opposed to the expense being borne by the water utility. So I'm wondering if the motion should be amended to say that we would explore the option of using that fund and using it if we could, and if not, we pay it out of the utilities budget. Is that?
We could take your preferred choice as part of the motion. We could.
Because I think that's a valid point. We do,
Yeah. So if you'd like to make an amendment to it?
I would like to make an amendment to it, so.
Okay.
I'll
All
ask
right.
Councillor Digdon if he approves that amendment, or do we need to vote on the amendment?
Yeah.
As long as he says it's a
It's
friendly
okay?
amendment.
Yeah,
It's, yeah,
yeah.
Okay, so any further discussion on that? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. And I do, I would raise, from that motion, that perhaps we do also contact maybe municipal affairs to start there, to talk to them about what, you know, what is an extremely significant cost to a municipality our size, and what some other, you know, alternatives could be. Maybe we could encourage some policy development around that, if councillors would be in favor of that.
I can take that direction.
Okay. Okay, so, could we have a motion then to request that staff discuss the matter with municipal affairs to look at maybe
I'll make
policy
that motion.
options? Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sean Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. So the next item is, again, under the Director of Public Works. It's the report on fire hydrant installation on Langley Lane and Point Tupper. And thank you, Chris, for your report on that. Maybe I'll open for discussion from councillors or the CAO if you'd like to provide any comment as well.
Yeah, well, we're also waiting on a second part of this report as well. We had a conversation with the CAO in Port Hawkesbury, and where fire coverage in that area comes from the fire service provider, which is Port Hawkesbury. We've asked that CAO to reach out to the chief in that area to answer a couple questions for us if he could, just to help us in this decision-making, in your decision-making process. One, were there any issues with the initial incident? And two, is a fire hydrant warranted in this area based on his observations? And so now we just asked that CAO on Thursday up in Ingonish, so he hasn't obviously had time to get back to us, but we do expect that report back shortly. And, you know, you have the numbers, that's a piece of the puzzle now.
Yeah.
But I think waiting for that advice from the fire service provider in that area would be beneficial prior to any decision of this council.
Okay, thank you, Troy.
Yep.
I would agree. That was
Yeah.
exactly what I was gonna ask, if we had heard whether or not they
Yeah.
felt it was something that was necessary.
Yeah. So, and I mean, the numbers were pretty striking in
Yeah.
this report as well. The quote from the engineer came in at, the low end was $98,000 because it would require 200 meters of PVC to be installed, new water line to be put down, so. And then, of course, the second option to do two hydrants was closer to 177,000, so I think it would only be prudent to wait for the report if
Perfect.
councillors are in favor.
I would agree. I think more information would be a good thing. The only thing I would caution all of us, I guess, is that if Port Hawkesbury, let's say in this case, you know, the fire department is what services it, if they're not gonna bear any of the costs, I would find it fairly unlikely they would come back and say, no, it's not necessary. They're probably, if it's something they could get added at no cost to them, I know if I was in their shoes, I would probably say, yes, it's very necessary.
We'll watch for the bias, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that piece of information is the deciding factor, right?
It's
Like,
just-
yeah,
yeah.
if they say no, then to me, it's a bit of a dead issue. But if they say yes, then I think we need to consider, then it's about cost benefit, right?
Right.
That's-
Yeah, great points.
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion on that item? Okay, so I don't believe there's any action being taken except a wait and see, so we'll,
Yep.
don't need a motion on that one. And we'll move on then to correspondence. We have a couple of items under action required. The first is the correspondence from the municipality of the District of Guysborough regarding Premier Houston's correspondence to Minister Champagne. That's a mouthful. The original letter from the Premier referenced the lack of support and participation from telecommunications company as Hurricane Fiona was descending on the region, but specifically with regards to proactively keeping the Provincial Coordination Center connected to their response plans. And, you know, he recognized while improvements have been made in some areas to cellular and landline service, there are still, as we know, many cellular towers operating on generators, and the service is unreliable in some areas of the island, Cape Breton Island. So the Premier was issuing the call to Minister Champagne, the federal Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, to consider all potential legislative and regulatory means to hold telecoms accountable for participating in emergency planning and the response and the preparedness and the mitigation and all of that. to the fullest extent possible. So Warden Pitts, in his letter to, back to the Premier and copy to all of us, has encouraged all municipalities to show support for the Premier's correspondence to Minister Champagne. And this, you know, if we were going to do so, it would result in a letter echoing, you know, Premier Houston's comments to Minister Champagne. So just want to open that for a discussion from council, if you think such an action would be beneficial and warranted. So, yeah.
I can definitely say in District 5, we had a lot of issues with, and even well after the storm, like I'm talking 2-3 weeks later with large landline outages in Framboise area. That being said, the government relations contact was great to get back to me in a timely manner. I have, you know, all the time in the world for her. She's been fantastic. However, that being said, it can't be stressed how important this is and how many times a lot of these people in rural parts of District 5 have gone through this with loss of landline for days and weeks on end. And, you know, us having to reach out to try and get answers, you know.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden.
Agree.
Yeah. So perhaps some correspondence kind of stressing the preparedness of infrastructure, in, you know, as also echoing Premier Houston's comments, then would that be satisfactory? Okay, so could I have a motion then? And I can certainly pen that letter to the Premier, but a motion would be to follow up with a letter to Premier Houston, stressing the importance of those, of the maintaining the infrastructure and communicating about that maintenance. So,
I'd be willing to make that motion.
thank you, Deputy Warden. Could I have a seconder, please?
Second that?
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. So the next item on the agenda was correspondence from Mayor Pam Mood from the town of Yarmouth regarding the Yarmouth Ferry Service. So this is the Nova Scotia to Maine ferry. You know, it was her email was, you know, filled with, you know, information and reasons about why they're looking for support. You know, she speaks about the vessel landing in Yarmouth, but certainly welcoming thousands of visitors to Nova Scotia that start in Yarmouth and then go out to all kinds of other places in the province. Her request is for one of us to write to the Premier and the MLAs about whether or not we support the ferry, the impact it has on our community, the impact we know it has on the province, and or to reach out to other businesses as we can to do the same. So the key points that she was making, I'll just pick a couple out. You know, she talked about over 50 million people on the northeastern seaboard of the U.S. without the ferry would not have a direct link to Nova Scotia. And of course, many people will not make their way here yearly. The impact of property sales by U.S. citizens in our communities, job losses in the sector. She did speak about the loss of consumer confidence and investment confidence and provided some pretty specific examples of folks who were, you know, putting their plans on hold or backing out of land deals when they heard that the future of the ferry might be in question. And her rationale, I thought, was interesting in saying that it's not an issue between the province and any municipal unit. It is, you know, it belongs with the provincial and federal government to come up with a plan to maintain an international link to the U.S. And certainly, we saw a follow-up letter from Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton in the town of Port Hawkesbury. And I know that, you know, for her and for, I think, you know, even myself, that this kind of does hit home because we've seen what it's like when an important regional asset is threatened, and how important it is for us all to, you know, show some solidarity around that issue. So, you know, our airport, the Alan J. McCacken Regional Airport, has been a critical piece of our economic development strategy here and continues to be. So, I guess, you know, just open for discussion. Would councillors be in favor of providing a letter of support from Mayor Mood, or would we like to kind of table this for now? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I'd be in support of a letter of support for the mayor of Yarmouth, for sure. I mean, being in the tourism industry for the past 30 years or so, I mean, I know all too well how important the tourism industry is to this province. So, yeah, I'd be in favor of that letter, yep.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sampson. Maybe I'll just go around the table since we started in District 1. Councillor Digdon, what are your thoughts on this?
Going to the most important district second, that's great to see. Yeah, I definitely, I agree. I'm all in favor of sending a letter of support from us. You know, as you stated, it, you know, the spin-off is huge. So, I'm sure many of those people that do travel, end up in our, county over the years, so, yep.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Digdon. Councillor Melanie Sampson?
Yeah, I would be in support of a letter of support as well, and I think, you know, for me originally, when I was reading Mayor Mood's request, I was thinking, that's like a long way away from here, you know, but then when I read Mayor Chisholm Beaton's letter, it really resonated with me in terms of the solidarity that is required in small towns and across the province, in regards to these critical pieces of infrastructure, right? So, and these links to the rest of the world, so I would support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I would definitely be in support as well. I'm embarrassed to say I haven't spent all that much time around Yarmouth, but I did spend 3 or 4 days within the last month down there, and it was funny because the topic of conversation came up with some of the locals, and there was a woman who was explaining to me, she said, you know, her and her husband were retired, but you could watch it when it was canceled originally, about talking 10 years ago or more now. Stores that had been there for years had closed up that didn't reopen. She said it's finally you're starting to see the progress coming back from finally having it, and you're seeing it throughout the town. And it was devastating how it happened. Now, she said we were retired, and you know, you could argue it didn't affect us directly, but you could really see it within surrounding areas, and it had a serious impact. And on the way back, I was talking to actually a former councillor in the Queens County area, and he mentioned about, you know, we subsidize all kinds of other forms of transportation because they're essential. They don't necessarily always turn a profit, but it's part of a greater strategy.
That's right.
And it's, you know, they were up, he was in the Liverpool area, and they, you know, they saw the impacts as far up as there, and he felt it was very important as well to maintain this service.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. So I'm hearing then most folks, or everyone, is in favor of, you know, providing a letter of support to Mayor Mood. I certainly would be in support myself, so maybe if I could have a motion from council to provide a letter of support to Mayor Mood regarding the Yarmouth Ferry.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Digdon.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Deputy Warden. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Okay, thank you, everyone. So there is additional correspondence, just for information purposes. We have a letter returned to us from the Honourable John Lohr regarding the Municipal Code of Conduct. And I appreciated his comments in that he was going to forward that information over to the working group, which incidentally is being chaired by Mayor Pam Mood. So that was generous of him to certainly share that information and consider our recommendations. Also, a fantastic infographic connecting the dots on the poverty impact. It's from the Dorothy Bennett, who is the Community Health Board Coordinator for the Eastern Zone. I wonder if that's something we could share on our social media, just,
Absolutely.
you know, where Richmond County is one of the, you know, has one of the highest poverty rates in the province. It would certainly be important, I think, to share that information.
Okay.
And the next item is a correspondence from the Office of Ill New Affairs. We have received a couple of fantastic posters for Mi'kmaq History Month. They're here in the office. Are they up on the board? They're up
They're
on
up
the
on the
board?
board here and
Right.
up at the Richmond Arena.
Oh, great. So up in both places, and maybe I'll take a little picture with them before we go, because they're beautiful and they're informative, and they're in both 3 languages, correct? Did
I believe so.
Yes, French, English, and Mi'kmaq, of course. So thank you to the Office of Ill New Affairs for providing us with that information. The next item on the agenda is we're going to move into unfinished business. So, and just, I guess for counselors, this is a kind of a new grouping of information where we felt we could kind of collect items that needed some follow-up. So it would be clear that we had already talked about it and coming back with some additional information or for discussion. The first item is the private ways bylaw number 66. The second reading's been deferred to November 28th because we need to satisfy a publication timeline there. So we'll take care of that then. Really not much for discussion unless anybody has any questions on that. Okay, the next item is from Jason Martell, a CFO, regarding the Isle Madame Historical Society Type 1 Infrastructure Grant Fund request. So Jason has provided some backup information, I guess, about that specific request. And I just want to open that for discussion from council. Is there any comments, or Troy, if you wanted to kind of
Sure, I
mention
could
anything?
help,
Sure.
maybe put a bow around it for you. It was asked if this would qualify under the CCBF, and it does. So that opportunity is there to fund it through that instead of the other grants. But the last paragraph of Director Martell's, I would direct council's attention to that, because it is true that in a lot of other municipalities, they keep the CCBF for their own municipal infrastructure, as it did replace the old gas tax, which was used mainly for roads and infrastructure. So this would be an additional step in your motion, is that we do need to look at possibly, because we don't want the CCBF to be just opened up. This is, of course, staff recommendation to council that, we need some guidelines around this just to make sure that the priority for that reserve or that fund is for the municipal infrastructure just going forward. So we could have further conversations on this, but 100% it would qualify under the cultural aspect, I believe, for this one. And you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. So any comments from council on that?
Yeah, no, just, to refer back to what CEO Nicholas, I mean, when you're looking at the internal infrastructure, we just went through that with the water main relocation situation, right? So that's where it should be used, and that's where the focus should be. Having said that, when it comes to the name of the gas tax fund, which is the community building fund, there is some opportunities there to invest externally when it comes to, building our community, when it comes to infrastructure and heritage and culture and tourism, right? So I think, like you said, CEO, I think the priority's got to be internal, but sometimes, in situations where we can invest, we can also do it as well, right?
Okay, so two decisions then to make this evening. We all know the status of our grant, our regular grant funds are pretty much depleted.
Yeah.
There's still some in there, but not much.
Yeah.
So we would need to make a decision on whether or not to proceed with providing the $4,500, or to provide some other amount from the grant fund, from the CCBF. We can make that decision this evening, or we can table that decision to our next committee of the whole. If we want some more time to kind of consider that and consider a strategy for going forward on it. I know that's normally we do make those decisions at committee of the whole, but it's up to council, and you can just let me know your wishes.
So I mean, we have been talking about this.
Yeah.
This is not a new
That's right.
topic of discussion for this council, right?
Yeah.
We've been talking, when we talked about it through budget deliberations, what some of the usages for the CCBF could be, and we've talked about developing policy, and it's on the slate of policies to be worked on, and of course the CFO referenced that in his memo as well. I'm also just concerned about precedent setting, to be honest, because we haven't as a council really decided where we want to go with that policy. That's, so I'm just trying to pull up where we are with our rest of our funding. Thank you. I mean, we still have money in our Type 4. I know that we still have a lot of months left to go. I'd be inclined to not pay it out of the CCBF, just with the lack of policy and the precedent setting part being the major reasons for that, right?
Okay, yeah.
I think I would tend to agree. I think we don't want to set a precedent there until we've decided as a council what direction we want to go with that fund. And that could be a priority of ours going forward, but if we decide through that process that this is something we want to use it on, this type of project, well then great, but I don't think it would be fair to approve it for this and then possibly not for anybody else on a similar project. That being said, yeah, there is still some in the type 4 if we wanted to entertain that idea, because I think it's a worthwhile project.
Yeah, so I guess the only comment I would have about that is that we did specifically at budget time, if you'll recall, set aside an amount for harbor front development, right?
yeah.
Through CCBF.
We did.
Yeah.
Would this be potentially considered, because we don't have policy around it. I mean, you and I have spoken about it, Councillor Sampson. We set up the fund, we knew specifically it was intent for waterfront development type things. And so, I mean, we've been telling people use the grant application that we have now because we already established the intent through budget. However, this didn't come under that conversation, but I am sort of wondering if it still might apply.
That feels like a far more appropriate way to
Right.
to go about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Because it's a waterfront development at the end of the
Right,
day.
so I think we had allocated something like $50,000
Yeah.
for that, so it's still CCBF funds.
Yeah.
But we could take it specifically from that pot because we
Already earmarked.
earmarked it.
Yeah,
That's
I
it.
hadn't really remembered about that, so
Yeah.
that would definitely
Same
change the view for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree, yeah.
Okay.
That wasn't something I was considering at the
Yeah.
time, but I
Yeah.
mean, this is something, as a group, we had decided that
Yeah.
direction
we-
we wanted to go,
Yeah.
so that's fair.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay.
That is on a budget line, the 50,000 for
Exactly.
harbor development
Right.
is, that might be a
Okay.
direction to go in, yeah.
As long as we're all in agreement that this will
Yeah.
qualify under like that harbor front intent, then I
Yeah.
think we're,
Yeah, I mean, we had just talked about things that related to waterfront.
Exactly, yeah.
We were kind of indeterminate ourselves,
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
So then I'd look for a motion to approve the $4,500 request from, I'm just gone blank, the Alameda Dam Historical Society for $4,500 through our harbor front, or whatever that terminology is,
Yeah.
budgeted Canada Community Building Fund allocated amount. That was a mouthful, sorry. Could I have a motion to that effect?
Yep.
Okay, Councillor Sean Sampson?
Yep, I'll make
All
that
right.
motion, yep.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder?
I'd second that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sampson. All right, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, that motion is carried. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is from Terry Smith, with regards to correspondence from Terry Smith on the Destination Cape Breton request for a letter of support on the provincial amendment to the marketing levies, and we had deferred that to this meeting because more information was requested related to the seasonal property tax rebate program. And so many thanks to the staff for following up on that. We got we have an excellent letter here, kind of providing an overview in Richmond County. And it's from Jason through you, Troy, so thank you for that. Jason provided some information about the eligibility under that seasonal tourist business designation program. It does provide a reduced tax rate of 25% for some eligible properties. In Richmond County right now, I believe there are 8. So they're in the few. But in terms of the impact on property tax of that program, it looks to be fairly minimal. We still would see the commercial businesses paying that higher tax rate compared to an Airbnb, which is, I think, where a lot of the conversation was coming from last time. And again, the property tax is not directly related to the marketing levy. The marketing levy is an in and an out. It's something that the business doesn't pay, they collect and remit. And then, as opposed to the property tax, which is a direct cost to them. So so given this information, I am wondering if council would be in favor of providing that letter of support. And the 3 items were that the new legislation state that the levy apply to all fixed roof accommodations as defined in the Tourism Accommodation Registry Act, regardless of the number of rooms. 2, that the language for usage of the funds be changed to funds collected to be used exclusively on activities and programs that directly support the development of the tourism industry and the marketing destinations from which they were generated. And that would allow the funds to be used in areas like addressing the workforce shortage, in addition to marketing. And the 3rd one was that there's a seamless process to replace the current Cape Breton Island Marketing Levy Act with the new legislation, so there's no impact on planning for destination Cape Breton and on budget specifically. So those are the 3 things they're looking for the letter of support to address. Given the information that's been collected and the discussions we've had, I just would like to check in with councillors if you'd be interested in providing that letter.
Well, the information regarding the seasonal tourist business designation tax reduction program really wasn't the deciding factor when we originally talked about providing a letter of support. At that time, our original hesitation was just to see what other municipal units were doing in response to Terry's presentation to them.
Right.
So we still haven't gotten any more information in regards to what
No.
other municipal units have done.
Yeah.
And what they've decided in terms of letters of support.
That's right.
I believe it was Port Hawkesbury that was waiting on, I'd read an article. in the
They
report
They were doing the
that was-
same thing. Yeah, I
Well, they
sent
were-
it to you.
they were-
Everyone's
yeah,
waiting.
They were waiting on the province, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
And originally, we were surprised that they came asking for the letter right away, because at first, she said they were gonna be waiting to see what the province does.
Yeah.
And then the very next week, we get the request for the letter, and it just didn't connect with.
Well, the province provided information sessions, right? And so I think we both sat in on them.
Yep.
And what the province is intending to do is to say that it would be at least 1 room. So they're not gonna say all, they're gonna say it would have to be at least 1, and then allow municipalities to make the decision at the bylaw level. So the province is not gonna provide us with direction on that.
Right.
Whereas this letter would almost push them to try to
Right.
make some more concrete parameters
Well,
around.
and something consistent across the
Yeah.
province, so we don't
Yeah.
have 50-some municipalities with
Mhm.
50-some different
Mhm.
rules.
Yeah.
And apologies, councillor, I missed the part B of that one,
Yeah.
reaching out to the other municipalities,
Yeah.
otherwise we would have.
I don't know, like.
I don't think the decisions have been made
To,
yet.
to the deputy's point, I don't think that those decisions have been made. I saw that reporter article as well that said that they were waiting as well. But I mean, somebody has to be first out of the gate here, so, maybe it's time for us to stop the waiting.
So,
Maybe I'll just,
I'm
okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just reading again, for the probably 5th time, and I'm trying to break down the letter we got from our CFO. And again, I know it's not directly relevant to what we were looking at. However, he states in the letter that the assessment for a motel in the area would be $1.61 per $100 worth of assessment. So again, part of that was my issue. The other part, and I guess maybe that's something that gets brought up with PVSC, is that the assessment for the larger accommodations are much lower than the assessments for a lot of the Airbnbs.
But they're not, right? That's the letter stating that they're not.
The Airbnbs oftentimes are at the residential rate of 85
Right.
cents. So what this was explaining is just that even if you get that 25% reduction, they're still significantly higher.
I understand the,
Commercial rate's almost double rates.
right, and I understand that. However, if you look at the assessment value,
The property value assessment.
correct, is much lower or lower than some of the Airbnbs that are being used. So,
So a single Airbnb.
Is
you're saying
valued
the
more,
property value.
correct,
Is more valuable than, say, Dundee Resort.
100%.
Okay.
So in that case,
Yeah.
and I'm not picking
Yeah, well,
spots,
yeah,
I'm
just
just,
examples, yes,
Right.
yeah, because there's so few that we have qualifying.
But those are determined by PVSC. That has nothing to do with us.
That's right.
well, it doesn't, but at the end of the day, if we're looking at implementing, I know it's an in and an out to the consumer, however,
No, it's an in and out to the business. It's not an in and out to the
Sor-
consumer.
Sorry, yes, and then out to the business. However, it's an expense that the business has to show to the consumer that he doesn't have to show currently.
Yeah, if you were under 10 units right now.
Right.
It's not something that you're charging, yeah. Yeah. But the thought behind this is to provide a more level playing field, right?
That's right. That's the point.
So that's my question, more level playing field for who?
Everybody.
For everyone.
Because right now, like you give the example in Inverness County where you had somewhere that had 11 units, they have to charge that rate to any tourist coming in. You have somewhere a quarter mile away or a half, whatever it may be, with 8 units, and they don't have to
Don't have to
charge
charge,
that 2%, I believe it is at the moment. yeah.
Understandably so. So at the same time, then, are you going to give the, and I guess, yeah, I guess that's the trade-off is if you're registered as commercial, as then you're paying at the $1.60 a one, and if you're registered as residential, then you're paying at the 81 cents or 85 cents.
No,
Not
they could be
necess-
both commercial.
Yeah, not necessarily, because you could be registered as commercial and paying the full rate. You have to qualify for that discount where you have to be closed for, I believe it's, what did they,
4
say,
months
4
of the year,
months
I
at a
think, yeah.
minimum? So if you had a motel that was open year-round, they would never qualify for that rate. However, if they're seasonal, and let's say they're a 6-month operation, they'll get a 25% reduction, when in reality, they're only open 50% of the time, right?
So, and I think, when we spoke about this at the Investor Summit with Terry, maybe we do need to have a separate conversation on the impact of the seasonal tourist business designation, because it really does create a disincentive for businesses to stay open year-round, right? Now, there are some that are not going to do that anyway, and so maybe that still makes sense, but I wonder if it is a conversation that should be had. But like when I think of Richmond County especially, we have such a 12-month of the year economy here. It's, we're less seasonal, I guess,
Yeah.
in nature.
Less likely to have accommodations who are
Right.
shutting down for 4 months.
Exactly, which is probably why the number is 8 here in Richmond County. It's probably a lot more in other places,
Yeah.
I don't know, but,
Mhm.
anyway, but that's to me, that's a bit of a separate conversation. And I'll just kind of bring us back to the levy. We can make a couple of decisions. We can choose to provide a letter of support for a couple of the items that Terry has requested and not all of them. Although I will say, I think his key item is probably that all fixed roof accommodations and not saying 10 or more. But regardless, it's up to us. We can say we support some and not all of it. We can say we support all of it. We can table this for later and wait to see if other municipalities in the region decide to move forward. But to your point, Melanie, somebody does have to go first.
Somebody still needs to go
Yeah.
first.
So those are the options.
I'm generally not one for kicking the can down the road, although I could go either way on this evening, but maybe, I don't know if there is an appetite to wait to see if staff can reach out to other municipalities to hear back as to where they feel they're at before we make a decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because I think a lot of it is we want to be on the same page on this, right?
Sure. Okay. So we already had that kind of on the
That was
docket,
already
so
a
we'll
plan.
leave it
Yeah.
there. We won't need a separate motion
Leave
for
it
that,
on
I don't think.
unfinished.
And
Yeah.
we'll leave it on unfinished business. Okay, sounds great. So is everyone okay with that? Any objections? No? All right, great. So the next item on the agenda is the review of the action items list. And so I was getting some stuff done today.
You were on a mission
I was
today.
on a mission today. Well, I actually completed most of the mission on the weekend, but just sent them today. But there does seem to be, one question I had, I guess, there does seem to be old items that have been on there listed as complete for some time.
Yep.
So I think once they're on there, we see them, they're complete, they could come on.
So our
you think?
conversation, Madam Chair, if I could, is that this is the first combining
Yes.
of the two lists.
Yeah.
And our suggestion to council will be, once it's been deemed complete for over 1 month or 2, it comes off. And then we are gonna save these lists as, when we do this first purge, this is gonna be action list October 2022. And then that way we don't lose it. But when we
Yeah,
go to
yeah.
November, anything that's stale dated by 2 months, off it comes.
Yeah.
So could I suggest,
Yeah.
I've used these types of tools before, and usually we would just do it in a spreadsheet.
Yep.
And then we would just have a
Hide
drop
them.
down where we can sort just the ones that are pending or the ones that are completed.
Yep.
And then instead of this document being a PDF, it could be in a spreadsheet format. We just say we only want to see the ones
Yeah.
that are pending.
So the only caveat is our council laptops only use.
Yeah, it still, it
an
works on
open-
there,
It
yeah.
works on there? Okay,
Yeah,
I wasn't sure.
I've opened Excel, on the
Okay.
Libra
Good.
Office, whatever
But
that.
I wasn't
is
sure.
called. Whatever
Open
it's
Office.
called,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Don't know that the clerk doesn't know, we don't have Word or Excel, but we do have a free version of those.
Okay.
But I don't know, I'm just suggesting, cause that way they would all always be there.
They never go away.
Right, except we could sort it, and perhaps, I think we wanna see the ones that have been completed since the last time, so we may
Yep.
have like a different name for that,
Right.
right? Like recent complete, and then after the meeting goes by and we see the recent complete, it could just say completed or whatever. I wouldn't worry about those
We
details.
could work on some
Something like
formulas
that,
Yeah,
for that,
just,
though.
yeah,
Yep.
Okay.
cause I agree, it was like, oh my God, 17 pages, and I'm
Yeah.
looking for the
Yeah,
red
we've
ones,
been
you know,
busy.
so,
We've
yeah.
been
Yep.
busy. But, so in terms of that being public information, maybe I'm just trying to figure out.
Well, we could sort the report that it would show
Yeah.
like the recent completes
Right.
and the pendings left.
Yes.
And then that could be turned into a PDF that could be
Yes.
shown publicly. It's just that as counselors, if we wanted to go back and, did we have a motion on that
When did
before?
we do this? You could
Yeah.
still
Or whatever,
search
we
it.
could go back and find it?
Yep,
Yep.
exactly.
Yeah. So it would pare down the list for the public view, right? They
Absolutely.
would have seen the rest before, but,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
Makes it more
perfect.
manageable,
yeah.
100%. But we wanted to get everything combined
Yeah.
into one list, and
Yes.
sorry it was a big read,
No, no.
No,
but we wanted to make sure that nothing dropped off
Yeah.
and get your guys' eyes on it before
Yeah.
we start purging and,
Oh, I appreciate that because, there's been a lot of change at the municipality in the last 6 months. So
Yeah.
I think it's good that we had that kind of full review.
good.
And I do like that idea that we could, categorize with recent complete, et cetera, so that's a great idea.
Mhm.
So, updates on that, they're not really questions, but, items number 59, 75, and 79 are also, you can mark those as complete now.
What were they, 59?
59, 75, and 79.
Okay.
Are all completed now. Okay, so any other questions about the action items?
Any more word on number 40?
Which one's that?
Testing me. I don't remember which one number 40
Oh
is.
my gosh.
Oh, yeah, the look-off. I actually, on my way back from if I may, Madam.
Yes, of course.
Chair, through you to the counselor, on my way back from the partnership last week in Ganesh, I drove by a certain director that was out doing measurements out there on the side of the highway. So I'll defer to him at this point.
Expect to have something for the next committee of the whole, I would say.
Okay,
Perfect.
Great.
great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And he did have his vest on.
Okay. Any other questions on the action items list then? Going once. Okay. We'll move on to items added to the agenda, and I did have, I think I added these chamber awards first. So the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce Fall Dinner and Awards Gala is coming up. There are nominations open right now for several awards. The Excellence in Business Award, the Outstanding Customer Service Award, Export Achievement Award, Safety Champion Award, Rising Star New Business, and Immigrant Entrepreneur of the Year Award, as well as they'll be recognizing the Club 25 and Club 50 recipients. So just want to encourage folks, if you do know of businesses in your community or people in your community who would qualify or be a good candidate for any of these awards, please do nominate them. The deadline is October 29th. 2022, and you can just nominate right online at straightareachamber.ca, and the gala itself will be held on November 16th, 2022. We've had some really awesome award recipients from Richmond County in the past, so hoping to have a good showing there again. So.
If I may,
Yeah, that's right.
through you, will we be going as a table, or how do we normally handle the Chamber Awards dinner? Is that something?
Yeah, I think normally the ask goes out for folks who may be available to attend, and then we'll purchase tickets accordingly to make sure we show our support. Particularly, you know, when there are winners from the county in the room, it is nice for us to be there to show our support for them, so.
Okay,
Yeah, great. Next item on the agenda, I think, Councillor Sampson, you had added Langley Lane.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So after the meeting where we had decided to pass on the paving of Langley Lane, I've just continued to think about, you know, the state of that road, and I'm just wondering if there's an appetite for council to support me in requesting that staff do a little investigation in terms of, you know, we know that the program that we had been sort of approved for, that's not gonna work for just regular repairs. But if there was some other type of program or some funding through the Provincial Department of Public Works to maybe get some work done on that road if it was a cost-shared piece. So we had approved a budget in our CCBF to do that road, you know, with the intention of paving it. But really at that time, it was because that was the only avenue we had to get any work done that we could impact the decision. And so I would just, you know, again, just asking if other councillors are in support of me requesting that perhaps Troy and his team do a little investigation to see what's possible. If we could kind of move those funds to a different, you know, still the same road to get work done, but maybe through a different program or a different kind of funding partnership. Because it's in a terrible state.
Deplorable condition, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I mean, it could potentially have impact on other projects as well, so it would be good information to have, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillors?
I guess the only concern I would have, and I don't think, well, and I could be wrong, but I believe the CCBF is the only fund we have available to us to use. I'm not opposed to having staff look into it, I don't believe we have another option available to us, other than the,
I think Councillor
but I
Sampson
meant-
is suggesting there might be provincial funds that could go with our CCBF.
Right, we already have money set aside for that road. The intent was that we would be cost sharing a paving project for that road. So what I'm saying is, I'm not necessarily asking that, you know, that we spend more than what we had allocated to Langley Lane, but maybe
Are there
even
any-
less than that budget we had set aside in the CCBF, and then hopefully,
Combined with-
maybe the, you know, the province may have something that they can pull with our money to do something there. Because I think in the past, when we've been asking for ditching and grading and gravel and all those pieces, it's been under the premise that the province would pay the whole piece, right? And so they're hesitant to do that, which I can understand. So I'd just like to, I think, you know, again, not to commit that we would do it, but like, what would be the options and what would that cost look like?
Glad
Yeah.
to take that on.
Okay,
Just to, you know, explore, for my own knowledge
Just
as well.
to explore, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
okay.
I'd be willing to second that as well, because I think a lot of what we have encountered is there's some of these J-class roads that are dirt roads that residents would probably be more than satisfied if they were properly maintained. However, the condition they're in is subpar at this point, to put it mildly, and it seemed as if the paving was our only option, but it would be nice to find out, is there any other way?
Right.
Because we are paying a fee annually to maintain these roads, but there's a question as to what we have to show for it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so it sounds like the motion from Councillor Sampson is to request staff to look into other provincial funding options for Langley Lane. And I think Debbie Warden, you were seconding that motion. Okay, so is there any further discussion?
I would maybe reach out to, I guess to Sean O'Connor or even Trevor, and, you know, Langley Lane is a gravel road.
Yeah.
It's got rack over it, which was just put, you know, several years ago because there was an accessible amount, so they just covered Langley Lane because it was the closest. But again, it is a gravel road, so yeah, it might fall under, you know, the RIM project for next year, or it might be able to.
Yeah, good point. Okay, will do. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. All right, so the next item on the agenda is question period. which is restricted to the remainder of the agenda. So everything following the Committee of the Whole report. And again, the phone-in number is 902-226-9885. So we'll just allow for a few minutes for folks from the gallery or the phone-in. And again, that's 902-226-9885. I almost have that number memorized.
Sure. I know.
Oh, yes, go ahead, please, Richie.
Thanks.
So we have a member of the public here in the gallery, Mr. Richie Cotton. I don't think that mic is active.
Okay, so we
Yeah,
don't need to worry about that then?
I don't think.
Okay.
That little white thing.
Just, it's on the, I guess, the assessments for, hotels and along that lines. I understood about going from the 2 to 3%, but I really got confused on the assessed value. That's, you could just enlighten me a little bit more on that?
So the assessment, I think there was a discussion of the property tax situation about how much people would be paying based on their assessed value. It's really not connected to the marketing levy percentage at all.
It shouldn't be, no.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
I was getting confused.
Yeah.
I thought it was gonna be an extra charge on top. And I was
Yes, no, so
Yeah.
the marketing levy would be, well, it is now 2%, I think it would be 3% of the room rate that is being charged to the consumer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second thing, I don't wanna redo it publicly, so could I have a minute of your time after the meeting, you're and the CEO, just for,
Yeah, no, that's okay.
there's a phone call coming
Yeah,
along.
that's a good thing, Richie. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a phone call coming in.
There's a delay.
Oh, so we'll just need whoever's calling to turn their volume down.
Hello?
Hello?
There we are. Hi.
Hi.
Did you have a question for a question period?
Yes, it's Jermaine McDonald from St. Peter's.
Hi, Jermaine.
Hi. I just have a couple of questions, actually. Was the 25% reduction to tourism operations, is the only criteria that you have to be closed a minimum of 4 months?
No, Jermaine, there are actually several criteria. That's one of them. There are additional ones, but it's a provincial program, and I can certainly send you some information on the website link to it. I'm not as familiar with the details because it is provincial, it's not a municipal program.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
And my second question would be, there's a lot of talk around the property valuations. There's been talk about, some properties that aren't being taxed at all, some that, the differences in the values seem, way off. Would it not be good for some collaboration between our tax department and property valuation and even maybe registry of deeds to look at the valuations that we have currently? Because if there are big inconsistencies, maybe if things are found and changes have to be made, it could mean more taxes for our coffers, which could mean a reduction in taxes for the taxpayers or more money for the coffers to do some badly needed infrastructure work or that type of thing.
Yes.
So I'm just, because I often hear that, it's the valuation services people, that's their job, but I would think that having a tax department, property tax department, that, that if there was some collaboration there.
Yeah, so that's a great point, and when that had come up, when the discussion on potentially untaxed properties had come up a year or two ago, we did collaborate with PVSC, and there was a whole project that was undertaken, and I think some information was reported back to council, and it was discovered at that time that there was kind of minimal impact, I believe. I'd have to go back and get the details of that report. I think still maybe some questions in people's minds about that, but that was the report they had come back with, and they worked directly with our staff here to get that report done. On the property valuation side, it rests so solely with with PVSC, that assessment piece, but certainly, you know, good, I think good suggestion to take forward to see if there maybe is anything that can be looked at in terms of, I don't want to say normalizing, but making sure that property valuations are equitable and standards, that type of thing, so.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Jermaine, Councillor Melanie has a comment she wanted to make.
I've spoken to some folks at PVSC before, the assessors, right? And I asked them really a lot of that question, in terms of how do they ensure that assessments are current? So lots of people will appeal their assessments because they feel they're too high, but what happens if it's felt that an assessment is too low? And so what the way she explained it to me was, if those things are reported, then they get put on a list of things to investigate, and that they had a fair number of properties that they were working on. So they actually have a project where it's a bit of a rotation, where they actually review assessments of properties to see whether or not they are high enough. So again, obviously it doesn't make sense to review every property all the time, but that it is part of their ongoing process to do some of that review work, and that if there are particular properties that that we're concerned about, that we're able to provide them with that information, and it sort of gets into the rotation of ones that they're gonna look at.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that information.
Jermaine?
Okay, one more comment, Jermaine, sorry.
Jermaine, it's Michael. So just to add a little more insight, I guess, to the PVSC, and I spoke to our CAO just last week about this, and personally, it is a pet peeve of mine, and it hasn't dropped, but we have done a lot of work, and PVSC has done a lot of work, although I don't think they've done enough yet. So I did reach out to our CAO last week, and he will be, I guess, in touch with, the revenue manager to just kind of look into the ones that are still not being taxed in Richmond County. Personally, there are still hundreds of property that are untaxed in Richmond County, and I believe, like everybody else, that, what's fair for one is fair for all. So, just a little more insight is that, the CEO is just gonna have a talk with our revenue manager, and he's just gonna kinda probably, I don't know how he'll do it, but he'll probably make a little scale or a little color map or a little something just to find out, within Richmond County, who is taxed and who's not.
Okay, and like I said, with those comments, Councillor Digdon, when we're hearing that there's possibly residential property that's taxed higher than commercial properties that are, operating businesses, whether it be tourism or whatnot, that to me is a red flag, I guess, in terms of, something like that would or should be checked on. So I assume that, based on your comments, that is being checked, and so that's good to hear.
Okay, thank you for calling in,
Thank you very much
Jermaine.
for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so are there any other questions? We'll just give the phone a minute or two, because only one person can call in at a time, so I know there's a delay.
Yeah, I never heard that delay before.
Yeah, when you're watching online, it's like a 30-second or 20-second delay, and then, so when someone calls in, they're hearing us, what we said 30 seconds ago.
It's delayed going across the passage.
Okay, so I'm not hearing the phone ring, so we'll bring question period to a close. And next item on our agenda is in camera, but I don't believe we have any
There is
items.
nothing, madam.
And so there being no further business, we'll consider tonight's meeting adjourned. So thank you very much, everyone, and thanks to those watching online. Appreciate your participation.